What's up, Fantasy Champions? Spotlight Sports Network is excited to tell you about an amazing deal from Thrive Fantasy, your place for daily fantasy sports and esports. Right now with promo code SS Network, Thrive Fantasy will match up to $50 of your first deposit. So go to thrivefantasy.com and sign up now with promo code SS Network. That's thrivefantasy.com, promo code SS Network. Do you like the Oakland A's? Are you a fan of the Golden Knights? Do you love the Los Angeles Chargers? Well then, my friend, you're in the right place. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show with your host, Jake the Snake SIlva, brought to you by the Spotlight Sports Network.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, welcome here on a Monday night. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching. We are live on Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter Periscope, and on Twitch as well. I've got so much that I have to break down here today, but I'm glad every single one of you guys could be here tonight. There's so much I got to end up getting off my plate, but man, it was an exciting Super Bowl weekend, and I can't wait to break it down to all of you guys. But first and foremost, before we start the show, basically this month, and more importantly today, marks at least 1 year that the Snake Sports Talk Show had joined the Spotlight Sports Network. It had been a year. I couldn't have been more happy. I couldn't have been more proud and blessed to be a part of a great network that has really thrived. For those of you that have been faithful followers and viewers here on the show and listeners, I really do appreciate every single one of you guys. You guys have been the heart and soul of this show. And this was a show that had 20 subscribers originally. And, back and forth, because 2020 was not an easy year for all of us, even for myself either. There were a lot of obstacles. There were a lot of challenges. There were a lot of hardships. But throughout all of this, all in a year, we went from 20 subscribers to standing tall at 322 on YouTube. And we're about 500 followers and likes on Facebook. And we are still a growing show on this network. So I thank every single one of you guys to being a part of it. And the biggest news that I'd like to announce, because we ended up striking a deal just last night and coming aboard with not just the Spotlight Sports Network, but is also serving to be a co-host of this show. You guys have known me for a long time. It had usually been my face majority of the time, just bringing you guys quality content, quality news, and so much more. And now I've got my right-hand man who's going to be helping me out, clearing up all of this smoke that's in the air, and not to mention all of these news we got to break down here up in sports. So without further ado, I want to personally thank and welcome aboard to the Spotlight Sports Network team and the Snake Sports Talk Show family, Jeremy Case. Jeremy, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. What a game it was last night, wasn't it? I mean,
Man.
what a game.
I mean, I have yet. No, I guess I could say we go back to Super Bowl 50, but that was the first time in quite a while Super Bowls I can remember a team getting worked like that. As much as the Kansas City Chiefs got worked. They got worked.
They got completely annihilated. They got exposed. And I think what's interesting about this, And this is kind of where, I'm going to shift to this here up onto the show. But first and foremost, we want to thank Jeremy so much for being a part of this team and being a part of this network as a whole. It's been an absolute blessing to bring you on, and I can't wait for future shows and for so much that we can grow upon here with the show and even for the network as a whole, man. It's been an absolute opportunity to bringing you aboard, man, and it's going to be fun. I cannot wait for what the future holds here.
Absolutely. I mean, the feeling's mutual as well. I'm very, very proud and happy to be a part of this network as well as your show, Jake. I mean, we did that last show and I felt like there was something there for us to work off of. So I finally just said, screw it, messaged you. And
you just went with your gut. You just went with your gut and you took a risk right there, and that's
the rest is history.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and start to break it down and shift to this. So folks, last night I thought it was the perfect story of what it truly means to be successful in life. And this is in all aspects. This is in business. This is even in sports. This is everywhere. And I thought last night was the perfect example because everybody was all about, Tom Brady's just getting old in this game and everything. But that's probably the best version of Tom Brady I had ever seen. I thought it was great. I thought it was magnificent. What took things away, and a lot of us altogether got a reality check, much like life gives us reality checks all the time. Tom, at age 43, did the most improbable and impossible thing that has never been done in the NFL. He went to Tampa Bay after spending 20 long years in New England. They never gave him what he wanted, even though he won 6 Super Bowls. He built a culture. It's the Patriot way. Do your job and all of this stuff. But then initially, what changed about the way things went, it was kind of hard for Patriot fans because they knew this day was coming and it was going to be daunting. But then initially, Tom, he had a lot on his mind and he had a decision to make because if New England was not going to give exactly the weapons, or at least what Tom wanted, Tom was saying, I'm out. And he's been doing this for 20 years and winning 6 Super Bowls, appearing in at least 9 of them with New England. And coming into this year, where the pandemic hits, he signs a 2-year contract, gets involved with everybody. The first thing he did was phone calls and FaceTimes to every single one of his newest teammates and gave an entire rundown. And what's so unheard of about this, because even though that the pandemic shut everything down, shut the facilities, the practice fields and so much more, Tom still found a way to make it happen because that's who Tom is. He's the guy that's willing to make the sacrifices for the team. Let me ask you something, folks. When was the last time Tom Brady ever took a max contract? I don't think anybody did. Nobody knew. That's because Tom never did. Tom never took a max contract ever in his career. There's a reason behind that. Because what's different between him and Patrick Mahomes is because Patrick Mahomes, by the next year, they then start that fat contract that he was signed because he was still under a rookie contract. Then they were paying him nothing yet until that contract starts. Now Kansas City's in a loophole. Tom had done this for so long. Never took a higher cut, like he never took a higher pay, never took a max contract deal. He always took pay cuts. Why? Because he wanted a better group around him. And that was the one thing Tom is so good at. And you all, and myself included, we've all bashed on Brady for so long. But I think it wasn't just about Brady was the reason we bashed. But I think it was because We were tired of seeing New England every year. It was the same sob story in the AFC. You were either getting Tom or Peyton Manning or Big Ben. The only one who broke the chain was Joe Flacco. That was the only person who really broke the chain of quarterbacks in the AFC that represented in the Super Bowl. That's it. After once Tom was eliminated from the playoffs, then it was Patrick Mahomes' time. Now, Tom leaves the AFC, goes to the NFC, which is filled with Matt Ryan. It's filled with Drew Brees. It's filled with Aaron Rodgers. A lot of different NFC quarterbacks. And Tom did the one thing that nobody had ever done. Go on the road in the playoffs. Beat Drew Brees. Beat Aaron Rodgers. And then got to the top of the mountain to beating Patrick Mahomes. Tom Brady, I have to say, and I said this last night in the post-game show. You guys can check it out on Spotify. We have it on our audio podcast. But Tom Brady, after last night, there should be no criticizing. There should be no debates. No more. Tom Brady's the greatest ever. It's set in stone. That's it. You can't argue that. Because what this did is this blanketed Joe Montana's legacy. But everybody's like, well, Joe Montana won 4 Super Bowls. He never lost one. But he only won 4 with one organization. When did he ever do that on a different team? He gets traded to Kansas City. They were competitive, but they were never good enough to make it to the Super Bowl. And Tom Brady and one other quarterback stands alone, winning a Super Bowl with 2 teams. Peyton Manning. It worked out beautifully for Peyton. Wins a Super Bowl in Indianapolis, suffers an injury. People thought he's done. But instead, he comes out as this freak of nature, goes to Denver because it was a trustworthy team that was giving him everything. And he wins a Super Bowl in 2015, in Super Bowl 50, and calls it a career. Tom has been doing this thing for 20 years, 21 now, at age 43, and he says he wants to play on beyond. It's so easy to him. And Tom's not athletic. Tom's not special. Tom doesn't have a rocket arm that all of us seem to fantasize from all of these young quarterbacks like Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. The one thing that he has that every single one of these young studs are going to learn eventually is what's built in here and what's built in here. That you can't teach. That's instinct. That's going with your gut, taking a risk, and making it work. That's why the Patriots were not the system. Tom Brady was the system. That's what made it work. And we could say what we want to about Belichick being the greatest coach ever. I'm not going to deny it. But initially, that game last night was all about Tom. And it was all about throwing it back in New England's face. And this is where I'm going to shift to this because I'm going to talk about Kansas City. But this also was a smack in the face to Patrick Mahomes and to Kansas City. So let's talk about the Chiefs now for a second. Okay, everybody wanted to rant and rave. Okay, Tom leaves the AFC. It's all about Patrick Mahomes. He owns the AFC. There's no denying that. I mean, they got dynamic weapons. You got Mahomes. You got Tyreek Hill. You got Travis Kelce. You got Chris Jones and Tyrann Mathieu. And it's like they're unbeatable in the AFC. But the competition is growing in that conference alone. Just because Brady's not in the AFC doesn't mean they won't be able to face him at some point down the stretch. They will. And Kansas City, what you witnessed about this, because everybody thought Patrick Mahomes was going to be ridiculous. It was just going to be easy. In fact, the real MVP of that game was Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles not once used a blitz, but yet the Buccaneers defense pressurized Mahomes 29 times without a blitz. And it was the smartest thing that they've ever executed. They set 2 safeties in the backfield. For what reason? To eliminate the deep ball. Then they have 4. I think this was one of the most completed linebacking core I ever saw in my life. Levante David, Devin White, Jason Pierre-Paul, and Shaq Barrett. All 4 of them. He utilized every single one of them. And Levante David was the smart linebacker. He was the one that was willing to stay in midfield and was watching what the quarterback was doing. Because initially, who was the other target that Patrick Mahomes could rely on? Travis Kelce. And he's there in midfield. So when that was happening, go ahead, Devin. Go ahead, JPP. Go and bring pressure on him. I got this. The whole pocket collapsed. And you watched Patrick Mahomes run majority of the time. Sure, he's got the legs, but he had nobody to throw to. But you know what I heard about Kansas City fans today? Oh, this game was so rigged. This game was horrible. You know, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear no excuses. Well, we didn't have an offensive line. We lost 2 guys. That's no excuse. You know, Cleveland beat Pittsburgh with a 3rd-string offensive lineman, 2 of them. Pittsburgh and TJ Watt couldn't touch Baker Mayfield once. What's your excuse? Well, the refs, they were throwing flags left and right. That's not their fault. You had 11 penalties, and you unraveled massively. You got a hold of yourselves. You let the ego in your mind take over, and that was what made penalty after penalty, mistake after mistake, yardage after yardage. And all you want to do is complain and cry and moan and have excuses. Get over it. Get over it. What Tom showed us last night. You want to be big and bad and you want to poke the bear, Tyrann Mathieu? Well, you're gonna hurt where it really hurts. And Bashaud Breeland, he was beat. He was beat multiple times. You couldn't cover all those wide receivers. You couldn't cover all those tight ends. You couldn't even stop the run. That was the difference maker. And Kansas City didn't score 1 touchdown in the game. All 3 of them were field goals. And that was the biggest takeaway. So people that think it's so simple to win a Super Bowl in this era, not on Tom Brady's watch. Because Tom's been doing this for a long time. Patrick Mahomes can take his fat contract. Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill can get contract extensions, and so can Chris Jones. We're not going to have problems with that. You spend the money the way you want to. But I'll guarantee you this. When you do that, you think more of the player rather than you think about the team. Ask yourself. I mean, when you look at some of these dynasties over the years in the NFL, I mean, San Francisco, Dallas, Pittsburgh, New England, did any of them ever have massive contracts for individual players? I can't name one because every single one of them were so dynamic in all spots. Think about that. And Tom just showed you exactly what it means to really win a championship. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. And listen, Jeremy's my witness because I just look at this game and I was so blown away. But it's classic Tom just giving us the spiel. He was giving us the reality check and said, you think it's this simple to win a championship? All right. I'm going to go to the most completed team offensively and defensively, and then we'll talk.
You know,
Classic.
Jake, Jake, 3 seasons. 3 seasons in a row, I stood 5 feet from one Peyton Manning every Sunday for 8 Sundays every season. And I single-handedly watched, both from a distance and up close, how one single man can change an entire franchise. And that's exactly what Tom Brady has done to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Absolutely.
And it is no more evident than what we saw last night. And it's just, wow.
And remember, it took Tampa Bay 19 years to even win a Super Bowl again.
Yeah.
And think about that, because you look at the 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. Now, they had some defensive players like Warren Sapp and John Lynch, who's a Hall of Famer, and we'll get into that later.
Rice.
Yep, Simeon
Rondé
Rice.
Barber.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man,
Derek Brooks.
Derek Brooks. Absolutely.
I mean, my God, it was a really good defense, and that was a defense full of grit. And offensively, you couldn't even name most of the players, like Warren Dunn, Joey Galloway, Mike Allstott, Keyshawn Johnson,
Brad Johnson.
The one quarterback nobody could even think of.
Right.
And just to see Tom do that, I think is extraordinary, because Joe Montana to this day can't even say that. He can't. And what Tom has done is he has shut the whole world up. And that's initially where this should not even be a topic of discussion. It should not even be a debate. It should no longer even have any kind of doubts or criticisms or nothing. He's the greatest of all time. End of story. And that's it. That game last night pretty much closed the book. Don't even open it again.
Yeah, we talk about Tom Brady being really great too, and I think more so than anything, he's also one of those guys who is really great at just recognizing what he has in the room and exploiting the positives.
Yeah.
And pushing out the negatives of people. I mean, you look at a guy like Antonio Brown, who was on this team, super, super problematic. Before, during the season, super problematic. And he walks right into Tampa Bay, and Tom just basically makes that all go away.
Yeah. And you know what, though? And speaking of that, because all 4 touchdowns, right? All 4 of those touchdowns came from just 3 people alone. So you mentioned about Antonio Brown and his antics. Absolutely. I mean, that was one that was career-changing for him. And the second time he's ever been in the Super Bowl in his career, because he was in with Pittsburgh at 45 in his rookie year, and then comes into Super Bowl 55, and he wins it. And he understood what it truly means to be a champion. 2 touchdowns from Rob Gronkowski. He was loyal to Tom Brady. And
absolutely,
the connection between the both of them is unbreakable and it's unshakable. And that's why it's so textbook. And then the 1 touchdown, Leonard Fournette. Jacksonville made one of the greatest mistakes by shipping everyone out of town. They got rid of all of Saxonville from the 2017 group that initially gave Tom problems until Tom executed.
That led him to an AFC title game.
Yeah.
At that as well.
And they don't even inquire a trade. They just release him. They made it dead money in the water. But then Leonard Fournette said, you know what? Tom Brady in Tampa sounds pretty good. I'm going to go there. And all 4 of those touchdowns were by 3 people that Tom recruited because of Tom.
Not only that, there's also a few players last night that Tom Brady made surefire Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
With just that win. Talking about Jason Pierre-Paul, a guy who spent most of his career in
and
New
he had
York.
won a Super Bowl with the Giants.
Yep. And another guy,
Ndamukong
Suh, very problematic, had a lot of controversy throughout his whole entire career, comes to Tampa Bay and somehow manages to put it all together to win. He is now a certified Hall of Famer. Because
Yeah.
why? He's got a Super Bowl now.
Yep.
A dominant defensive end throughout most of his career. No doubt about it. And Ndamukong Suh is a rough, tough dude. He can play defensive end with the best of them.
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned as well, Leonard Fournette, probably a Hall of Fame running back now with
Mhm.
that Super Bowl ring. Antonio Brown, probably now a Hall of Fame wide receiver because of that Super Bowl ring.
Mhm.
And it's all thanks to Tom Brady. It's all thanks to one man.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that all of us, even from what we watched last night. I mean, Kansas City got they got the whole thing of humble pie, because at that point they thought, okay, we win a Super Bowl. Nah, they go crazy. They go absolutely nuts and ballistic. But here's the thing, though, is that even sometimes for Super Bowl champions, it's still not that easy to win it again. I mean, just ask John Elway, ask Tom, ask, some of these guys that have gone back to back. It's not
You
that
picking
easy.
on me? You picking on me?
I mean, listen, John, here's what's funny. John Elway, early in his career, my God, how many times have you said, like, he should have won it when he was in his prime? And then he comes down to the tail end of his career and they finally won back to back. I mean, better late than never, in my opinion, but still, it was not that easy. I mean, you had Shannon Sharp, who was dynamic. You had Terrell Davis, who was dynamic. You had a couple of real good defensive players that made plays happen. But
Bill
initially,
Romanowski.
yeah, they worked it. And think about it. You were playing against the Falcons and the Packers. The Packers probably was the biggest one.
It was the hardest one.
That was the hardest one.
That was the hardest one for sure.
Yeah, and you're talking about Brett Favre, who won a Super Bowl already and still had some dynamic players around him, but Denver's calling was right there for John Elway. It had to be.
And had we played the Vikings that second year instead of Atlanta, thanks to one Mr. Gary Anderson missing a field goal, had we had played the Vikings that second year, I'm not so sure we would have went back to back, man. That Vikings team was stacked.
Yeah, that was stacked. Randall Cunningham,
Randy Moss,
Chris
Carter.
Yeah. I mean, even John Randall.
Yep.
I mean, my God, it was a stacked Vikings team, and they still couldn't even be able to get the job done by that kick. And a couple of other ones, too, that are certified Hall of Famers. Mike Evans. You know what's so funny about Mike Evans is he had been in Tampa for so long, since the very beginning. He never once inquired about getting me the hell out of Tampa. He never did. Nope. And I think that spoke a lot of volumes. And from what I've heard, and we'll get into the news too, he doesn't mind taking a pay cut. He doesn't mind it. Because he's starting to think like how Tom does. He's starting to see the bigger picture.
Because he's realizing now Tom's going to come back.
Right.
And it's harder. What did they say? It's easy to rise to the top. It's harder staying there.
Yes, it is.
It's much harder staying there. And the Chiefs have figured that out more than anybody this year, more than last year. But, I mean, also to the Chiefs as well, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Yeah, and the Chiefs got punched in the mouth. Patrick Mahomes got punched in the mouth for the first time in his career.
Yep.
First double-digit loss of his career. He got served a nice serving of humble pie, straight on a silver platter to him, and all he could do all night long, and all you could see on the side of that bench was just he had to eat it.
Yeah, and think about it because you had to think about it because this also meant for some of his teammates like Tyreek Hill and Bashaud Breeland and Tyrann Mathieu and Chris Jones and a lot of them, because even in a lot of them because what Kansas City fans did not understand. This is why we talked about this for so long. Kansas City is beatable at their game. And for me, standing as a Charger fan, because people thought that, the Chargers are terrible. They're not actually, if you think about it, because They didn't even have a single plan for Justin Herbert in his very first start. This is in Los Angeles. This is at home. And
they were prepared to just go with Tyrod Taylor and have him sit on the bench for the whole year.
Right.
They were.
And
till they got stuck with the needle in the lung.
Right. And the game itself wasn't even a Kansas City blowout. It was 23-20. That was the closest game you could even ask for. And then you go on in the last game of the season and everybody's like, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm not so sure about that. Because you go on the road to Arrowhead in the loudest stadium out there in the AFC and you win on the road. And that's one that spoke a lot of volumes. But that's where, it's like you said, it may be easy to rise to the top, but it's very, very hard to stay there. I couldn't have agreed more. And congratulations to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I just think, again, this closed every single question. This closed every single criticism, and it closed the whole book. We don't even have to read it anymore because we finally saw what it truly meant to be great. And Tom Brady showed exactly why.
And another person I forgot to mention too, Bruce Arians is now a Hall of Fame head coach.
He is at the oldest age of 68. Like that, yeah, history was written. History was absolutely written. But the thing of it is, Anthony Aguilar, the reason Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles couldn't be able to do it in Arizona, there were still missing pieces. There still were. It was not a completed team. It really wasn't. And Arizona, even though that they were a fun watching team, they didn't have all the pieces that Tampa Bay had. So
absolutely not. I mean, yeah, you had Larry Fitzgerald there, but outside of him, it was kind of hard to find anything else at that point too, because Tyrann Mathieu had fled at that point. You still had Patrick Peterson, and you still do to this very day, but you've also had one of the worst offensive lines in football in the last decade almost, really. I mean, that offensive line is not getting fixed anytime soon. It was just kind of a complete mess in Arizona.
Yeah, it's an absolute mess in Arizona, and it's unfortunate because think about it. You have Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, and they have to make this thing work. They have to build this thing to its best potential. And I love watching Kyler Murray. I really do. But like with him and with Josh Rosen, it still doesn't take away the fact that the offensive line still needs work. That's what people fail to realize. You could say what you want to about Josh Rosen. He could be a bust. He could be all that. But besides that, the offensive line is still not legit enough. It's not healthy. And neither is it really solidified where guys are executing their jobs.
I mean, I feel sorry for Larry Fitzgerald more than anybody.
So do I.
That guy deserves a ring. And he can't, and just to know that he came so close.
Yeah.
So close. Literally within a catch worth of having a ring. Thanks to who is that caught that in the corner for
Santonio Holmes.
Antonio Holmes. Man, that man deserves a ring. And I commend him for having his loyalty to Arizona the way he's had it. Because he very easily could have said at any point, I won out, I'm done.
And think about this, because his teammate, Anquan Bolden, he spent long years in Arizona until he finally won it with Baltimore. I mean, people forget about that. And he was the guy that just was like, we came so close, but now we're on the tail end. It's time I need to start thinking about this for myself. Goes and takes that contract in Baltimore, and it changed him. It changed the whole legacy for him. But I just think, again, anything is possible, but at the same time, as long as Tom Brady is breathing and as long as Tom is continuing to do what he does, it's not going to be an easy road. It's also not.
Also, give some credit to that front line. I'm not
Oh,
hearing any
that
credit
offensive
coming to
line.
that front. I'm hearing about all of Tom Brady and the Tampa
I mean,
Bay
dude,
defense, but I'm not hearing anything. There's 145 rushing yards and 195 passing yards. It takes a good offensive line to grind a defense down like that and to run it.
it does. And think about it. Tristan Wirfs, I can't believe people whiffed on this kid. This kid, by week 7, just became a wall. He is by far a superior wall. I thought he was the most valuable
Absolutely.
draft pick out of the offensive line class. Because think about it, the Giants could have had him, but instead they go with Andrew Thomas. A bunch of teams could have gone with him, but it went the way that it went, and Tampa was smart about that. But yeah, the offensive line, give him credit to it. I mean, ultimately, from top to bottom, this was the most completed team I've ever watched in my life. And here's the thing, it never looked like the Broncos and Seahawks game where it was completely lopsided. I
It looked
thought
more like the Broncos Panthers is what it more like than anything.
Very much. I agree with that, actually. Because if you think about it, I mean, it exposed so much of Cam Newton, much like it exposed so much about Patrick Mahomes. Yes, he's a great kid, but we cannot talk about this mini goat stuff. We cannot. You cannot end up because now without this with this Super Bowl loss, now Patrick Mahomes has to go into it 8 more times in order to really solidify that. And that's not going to be an easy journey road. It's not going to be.
And some of those players on that Chiefs team better think about adopting that Tom Brady mentality of taking a pay cut too. Because here soon they're going to be due to be paid.
They are.
And that's going to be a big problem that Chiefs are going to run into.
And this is why that I said, because this is where it's going to quickly unravel. You can have all the this is what I even mentioned about the LA Angels of Anaheim. You could have all the offense in the world, but when you don't have a pitching staff, that is where it unravels the most. And like Kansas City, you could have all the offense in the world, but when you don't have a defense that's shut down like what Tampa showed you.
Does it ever show?
It doesn't
ever show.
Yeah. And it showed exactly for itself that it means an awful lot. And they did not show it.
If last night taught me anything, it's what I've always said. And a lot of coaches will tell you this too. Defense wins championships.
Yes.
Offense sells tickets.
Yep. And I cannot agree with that more. And this is why that there are a couple of teams, and I'm starting to notice. Let me ask you, I mean, how many defensive-minded coaches, even from what we saw that are brand new hires that were DCs, how many of them were watching this game? And they were literally looking at this and they're going, oh, so that's how we beat Mahomes. So that's how we get wins against Kansas City. Brandon Staley, Robert Saleh, a lot of these coaches, I think they're starting to figure this out.
What gets paid more in the NFL? It's an edge rusher.
Yep.
Not a cornerback.
Yep.
It's an edge rusher. It's the guys who bring the pressure constantly.
Yeah.
That's why they get paid such big money. That's why you see big extensions like the one Von Miller got after Super Bowl 50. And the reason why he was Super Bowl 50 MVP is because last night just kind of reminded me of that movie, Remember the Titans? We're in that defensive game. It's like, don't you let them gain another yard.
Yep.
And it just
all night long. Yep.
It just sounded like that's what Todd Bowles said to his defense.
And this is even without, and this is without the blitz. They were basically playing smart football, and all they were really doing was just unraveling that offensive line. They didn't even have to. It just looked so cake to them in textbook that all they had to do was bring the pressure and make him run.
Yeah, they were just making him feel uncomfortable. They're collapsing that pocket quickly.
Yeah,
that'll make a quarterback see ghosts quicker than anything else.
Yeah, nothing against Sam Darnold either, but I mean, hey, anything could happen up to this point. All right, coming up next, because this past weekend we got Hall of Famers in the NFL. But what's so concerning, and we're going to break this down, Jeremy and I, but the NHL got Hall of Famers, NBA had Hall of Famers, NFL just had Hall of Famers. Where's the story right now in baseball? And this is the one that has been very controversial and one that I think has been so concerning but yet absurd for baseball fans, including myself and for Jeremy. So we're going to break that down here coming up next. Also, by the way, we're going to discuss this here on the Hot Press as well, as Jeremy's going to help me out with it. But we have a couple of breaking news in baseball, and then we're going to start to talk at least a little bit about hockey as well. So for all of you guys, letting you know exactly the biggest news. So the Spotlight Sports Network has initially agreed terms on a contract deal with a media company called Media. That's Meedia. And what is Media, you ask? Media is basically your tool to producing content, producing basic breaking news, and so much more. For those of you who inspire to really be people like us, the guys that want to end up breaking news, talking so much more, having rumors and thoughts, but you don't have a computer or you can't get to it. You're probably away from home. You're not at a podcast studio, or you're not even anywhere else that that requires a microphone and such. Well, not a problem. If you download on the App Store and you download on Google Play, Media has you covered. Media gives you backgrounds, gives you all sorts of topics, discussions, and all of it. You're basically your own PR person at the palm of your hand. And Media's got great tools. They've got great resources and questions to get you started on breaking news and so much more. So go onto the App Store and Google Play, download the app Media, Meedia, and start producing your content today.
Do you really want to be famous? Do you really want to be a superstar? Do you really want to get dangerous? Do you even know where the groupies are?
Welcome to Hammer's house. Welcome to the My City, My Game pod show featuring Raider J77, your place for all things Raiders and all things Trailblazers. Brought to you by the Spotlight Sports Network. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Now let's go.
Well, folks, by the way, for all of you fantasy gurus out there far and wide, coast to coast, all nationwide, you guys love fantasy sports and you guys also love winning cold hard cash. There's an app for that, and there's a website that you guys can go to called Thrive Fantasy. And by the way, it was cooking all of Super Bowl. But it doesn't stop there. We've got NBA, we got baseball around the corner, and we got hockey, and also, best of all, we got esports betting on the way. So definitely check out Thrive Fantasy. Download it on the App Store and, of course, on Google Play. And remember, guys, when you sign up today and download the app, use promo code SS Network. That's short for Spotlight Sports Network. And when you deposit $20 into your first play, Thrive Fantasy always promises to match it up to $50 on your first play. You guys could be winning up to $15,000 in pool play. So what are you waiting for? Download the app. Sign up today. Promo code SS Network on thrivefantasy.com. All right, folks. So we had all the Hall of Famers here from the NFL, and congratulations to every single one of them who've made it. I thought it was well-deserved. There were a couple of them that I thought, maybe it was too soon, or, it was pretty quick. But let me just, list you exactly the guys that ended up making it. So you had Peyton Manning, no doubt. Calvin Johnson, well-deserved, but a little questionable. Tom Flores, very much well-deserved, and it took way too long for the NFL to convince themselves they need to bring Tom Flores in. And I'm very happy that he ended up making it, and congratulations to making it and enshrining himself into greatness. Charles Woodson, very much deserved. Drew Pearson, very much deserved. And of course, Dunn as well makes it on there. So that is your NFL class. So folks, we've had football Hall of Famers just this past weekend, and not to mention all of the award winners as well. Congratulations to every single one of them. Basketball had their Hall of Famers already. They had the late Kobe Bryant, they had Kevin Garnett, and they had so many others. Hockey had at least a couple of Hall of Famers as well. What I can't seem to get really in my mind, and I loved baseball. Jeremy's my witness. I love baseball. I've lived and breathed it. I played it. I watched it. And I have seen greatness before my eyes and people that were enshrined into baseball immortality. But this year, the Baseball Hall of Fame has voted nobody. They voted nobody for the first time since 2013. And we have to break this down. But why? Why are there no Hall of Famers at all in the baseball realm? Is it because of Barry Bonds? Is it because of Roger Clemens? Is it because of the steroid era? Is that what's really making all the difference here? I don't know about you, but I feel like these baseball writers, I feel like there is so much biased opinions within the baseball realm. It's what's driving people like myself crazy. And even though it's pushing for content, but it's pissing me off at the same time. Because let me ask you, was it that difficult for hockey? Listen, the NHL, what makes hockey's Hall of Fame so legit, there still are players that are there and they're not very far behind. They were able to elect in the people that were well-deserved. They put in the production, they put up the numbers, but ultimately they also put in the hard work and they got enshrined into immortality. In the NBA, what's so unique about the NBA, there's a long list of NBA players I can think of at the back of my head, but they elected at least the right ones. They knew that Kobe was a for sure, no doubt Hall of Famer. They knew Kevin Garnett was a Hall of Famer because here's the thing. Even though he spent majority of time in Minnesota, he shaped his career the second he went to Boston. Of all franchises that has won championships, that enshrined him into the Hall of Fame. That is what reshaped his career. And there still are a handful of really good players that can get in. The NFL, and what's so different about it, think about it. We got Tom Flores, who has been in this league for years. And it took them this long to finally convince themselves, you know what? He's more than deserved it. We're going to put him in. And they did the right thing. But then also, here's the backlash. There are more and more players on this list that are growing each and every year. And don't get me wrong, they are very talented players. I looked at the list for next year, but it's gaining on them very quick. I don't know what's going on with baseball. I really don't. Because all these players, it's growing. And we don't have time to lollygag. We don't have time for biased opinions. We don't have time for any of this. You could say what you want to about the steroid era. Let me give you at least a little bit of reality check. Did we think about this when it came to Craig Biggio? Did we think about this when it came to Jeff Bagwell? Do we think about this with a couple of other players that were part of the steroid era? I don't think so. I don't. But people are like, well, it's Barry Bonds. He was on some stuff. Either way, you could not name another left-hander. Let me tell you this. Out of some of the players that I've played baseball with, some of them were left-handers. And by the way, Jeff Hammond, a.k.a. Hammer of Hammer's House, played minor leagues. He was in the MLB. He had the experience as well. And the one he looked up to was Ken Griffey Jr. But let me tell you the difference between Bonds and Jr. Jr. had the smoothest left-handed swing I've ever seen. He was smooth. He had swag. Barry Bonds had speed. He was the guy that was able to turn the hips so quick and use the knob of the bat as his. That was his target. That was the one that was basically. It was the one that was leading to where he was going to destroy the baseball. That's what that knob of the bat was all about. Leading with it and turning the hips. It was so quick and it was so fast, nobody could process it. I don't care what anybody says about, this. Oh, he was on some stuff. Stop it. And this list is growing and growing and growing. There's no time for lollygag. There is no time for biased opinions. And the more and more baseball continues to do this, this is where people are going to really turn away the most. Because baseball, all it's been about is it's America's pastime. What are we doing? What are we doing? We have no Hall of Famers this year. We can't even praise these. We can't even accept these talents like Fernando Tatis Jr., knowing he is changing the way this game should be looked at. Like, are you kidding me? It's embarrassing. And I don't know about you, Jeremy, but I was very concerned about this. And I was just like, me and Hammer, we went about this and we both are on the same page. This is ridiculous. But it just seems to me like baseball's become so biased and it's become so political that it just doesn't even make the game fun anymore. And it doesn't even make any sense. Like, I don't know what to think of this.
I'm going to try and be as calm as I possibly can about this because I'm a pretty emotional guy. Mm-hmm. But what baseball is doing is just absolutely asinine.
Oh, it's absurd.
To the most nth degree. You want to sit there and tell me that the game of baseball knowingly throughout the late 80s and the 90s knowingly knew that I'd say 85 to about 95% of the league was doing steroids. And you want to say that they condone that behavior. I didn't really condone it, but they didn't necessarily do anything to stop it neither.
Right.
And now these gatekeepers, I'm going to call them gatekeepers because they're not baseball writers. They are gatekeeping right now. That is what they are doing.
I agree.
And now these gatekeepers who could do nothing but praise these players in their heyday are now telling them no. Telling all these people no. You're going to tell Scott Rowland no. You're going to tell Todd Helton no.
Yeah.
I mean, to our knowledge, Todd Helton wasn't really doing anything, but who really knows? Everybody was doing it. That's the thing, is everybody was doing it. It was a level playing field as far as I'm concerned, as far as steroid use through the 80s and 90s.
Oh, okay? Very much. I mean, think about the list that we had all from the 80s, 90s, and even the 2000s. I mean, think about it, because you've got Jim Edmonds, one of the most ridiculous outfielders that was out there, who just made plays. I mean, there was a guy that he even had a really good stick at times. He managed to be like productive at times, but it was mostly those fielding highlight reels we always watched. Craig, this is why I mentioned Craig Biggio. We never even thought of this, and he was part of the steroid era, but he never took it. I mean, this is a kid from Long Island. Yeah, I mean, this is a kid from Long Island who lived and breathed baseball, and I mean, he had 3,000 hits, and he managed to make it in.
I mean, when you upset Curt Schilling to the point to where he says, "Take my name off the ballot," and he writes 1,100 words explaining why he just doesn't want no part of this, it's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah.
Baseball over the last 2 years now has done nothing but put themselves in a terrible position with the fans, with the TV rights people, with everybody. In every possible way, they have done everything they can to put themselves in terrible, terrible positions. I used to sit there in ballparks and think, man, how come baseball just doesn't get talked about as much as it used to? Like, baseball was Americana for a long time.
And why it doesn't even get televised majority of the time.
I mean, I remember very vividly in my childhood when the home run race was going on, you had games being broadcasted in prime time. We're talking about like Wednesday night at 7 p.m. slots. Now you're lucky to get a game on a Sunday.
Yeah.
On Fox, on one of the most premier networks that had a lot of other shows that they could have put on at that time.
Yep.
But it was the home run chase that got everybody watching.
Mm-hmm.
And now you can barely get a game in on Sunday. ESPN has almost done away with its Monday Night Baseball or whatever nights they had.
Yeah, the Sunday Night Baseball and yeah.
I remember when those were cornerstone games.
Very much.
And now they are just a sheer memory and a sheer shell of what they used to be.
Yeah, and you know what's so interesting about that? Because when it came to Sunday baseball, I mean, me and my great-grandfather, God rest his soul, at 92, but this was a man who he saw this coming. At 92 years old, I mean, he saw this coming, and he always reminded me so much why he loved Little League World Series more than he loved baseball. And this is a man who was a vice president of Little League World Series at one point years ago. And when I asked him why that was, he told me straight up. He said, the reason of that is because this game is a kid's sport. You watch all these kids who play in the Little League World Series, how much fun that they're having, how respectful that they are. And sometimes, yeah, they may shed a tear on a loss, or some of them may celebrate after a win. But that's what the game is all about. The game is really expressing life. You know, and I've always utilized baseball in everyday life because, listen, life will give you strikeouts. Life will sometimes give you hits. But initially, it's what you do after every at-bat, after every opportunity. That's what defines you as a person. And that's why I'm just like, this is absurd. This is so absurd because I loved watching Sunday Night Baseball. I used to love watching the premier game. This is why I kept pushing for this. Why we had 60 games last year is beyond me. And we should have had at least 90 to 100, if I'm not mistaken. And it was constant bickering back and forth. And you know, the only people who were hurting behind this were the people in the concessions, the people who ran the ballparks, the ones who live and breathe for fans to sit in the stands, to give them entertainment, to give them concession, food and drinks, and so much more. And nobody was thinking about that. They were completely selfish of themselves. And I feel like this is kind of the daunting of baseball that we come down to. It's like everyone in baseball has to have a slice of humble pie. Like what we just watched in this Super Bowl last night.
I mean, they couldn't even come to agree to a start time for this season until last week.
No,
Until last week.
No, and by the way, I just ended up finding out more news, and this this is going to draw your interest. But the MLB and the Players Association, they agreed on the 2021 terms. 7-inning doubleheaders. Runners on second base to start extra innings will return. No universal DH or expanded playoffs. That's the agreement.
Then why did we even toy with the fact of the DH in the National League to begin with? Why did that even happen?
Right.
Like, if you weren't even going to be serious and even consider it, I don't understand why Major League Baseball continues to do this.
Yeah,
like
I don't.
Why they'll just give and take,
right?
All they want,
and they try to claim it their own. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And this is the one thing that I even spoke with, and I will at some point I'll definitely have Hammer on here again, because I guarantee you, this is a guy who has played minor league baseball in his life, and he's been there, done that. He's seen exactly the politics in baseball, and he's seen exactly what this process means to be getting into the show.
I played it for 8 years growing up.
Yeah, and so have I.
I was enthralled with it.
Yeah, I mean, I lived and breathed it, and that was the thing. So the one thing that the discussion that I had was why we're not expressing baseball to its true potential. Why are we not building upon it? Because people, what they love is they love popularity. Why do you think people love watching basketball so much? Because they love the players, they love the popularity, they love to show off the shoes and the unis and the popularity. Football, the NFL has always been king. They've always been king because every single Sunday there's always a primetime game, at least 4 of them up on a Sunday. And what's interesting about it is nobody can take their eyes off. Out of every down, out of every quarter, and every half, nobody could take their eyes off of it. You know what's interesting? Hockey. What's funny about this is we have Wednesday night hockey. And even that
Thursday.
Yeah,
Thursday
and now Thursday too. And even that is prime time. Even those have prime time games, because you can tell me, like, anybody that's never watched hockey, or maybe have watched at least a little bit of it and another, you wouldn't tell me you'd be sitting down. Like, I'd be telling you, Jeremy, hey, want to watch hockey tonight? Penguins and Flyers are playing. Battle of Penn. You wouldn't sit down and watch, the Battle of the Rangers and the whole Battle of New York and all this other. Like, you wouldn't tell me you wouldn't watch primetime. Like, it's absurd. And then baseball, This is what I pushed for. They need to have more rivalries as primetime games, because who doesn't love rivalries? I can't think of one. I can't.
They were on the right track with, the last I think it's like the last 15, 20 games of the season is all interleague or interdivision.
Yeah.
They were on the right track with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were right there up on the right track. And the other part of it is I'm just like, because every single one of us, we love these rivalries. We love the Yankees-Boston rivalry. We loved it. We love the Giants and the Dodgers rivalry. We even love the Yankees-Dodgers rivalry. We even loved watching the Battle of Illinois, North and South of Chicago. Watching the White Sox and Cubs. Man, did they get wild and rowdy. Fists are flying. They don't like each other whatsoever. Why are we not pushing for rivalries like that? Because if you think about it, it's the ones that have the added tension of like, oh, at some point, somebody's going to throw at somebody and somebody's going to throw a punch.
Well,
we don't have that no more.
You think about it too. At one point, at the height of baseball in the 90s, it was spread across 4 major networks.
Yeah.
Each network too was averaging a Nielsen rating of like 9.8 or higher. There were 10 million people watching baseball at one point.
Yeah, and think about it, because we had baseball on TBS, we had baseball on Fox, we had baseball
NBC.
NBC. Yeah,
At one point was carrying baseball.
yeah,
NBC. That's probably next to CBS as big as it gets.
absolutely. And you know what? I'm kind of surprised at that. That, when you look at CBS, that they're not even televising baseball no more. And what's funny about this, because you remember the primetime games that would always be televised on ESPN all the time. All those primetime games. I mean, my God, there was always a story to tell. We don't even have that no more. We don't even have any more stories. We don't even have any more rivalries. We don't even have any juice. And I feel like that's completely lacking in the baseball world.
Literally and figuratively, there's no more juice.
Yeah, there's no more juice. And this is the one part that I just look at this like Bud Selig would have never allowed this to happen. Would have never allowed this to happen. Even on his own deathbed. Would not. And Rob Manfred continues to lollygag and continues to just sit back and watch this happen.
Where is he? Where is he? Where I haven't heard
quarantining or something. Yeah.
Where is he?
Quarantining or something, or whatever the hell he seems to be doing with himself nowadays.
He could be in a cabin in Minot, North Dakota, for all we know. Where is he?
Yeah, he's the good. And you know what's funny? You talk about ghost. I feel like he's the biggest ghost of baseball. Like, he's nowhere to be found. Like,
he is probably one of the worst commissioners there is in all four major sports right now.
Oh my God.
They have so many opportunities to do so much, and they have the biggest audience of youth out of any of them.
And here's what's funny. Why I think hockey is going to surpass baseball. And correct me if I'm wrong, but hockey has what Gary Bettman has enshrined in the league is, you look at all of these clubs, and now we've got the Seattle Kraken as an expanded team, but every single one of them, they're showing off their sweaters, they're showing off, all this stuff.
Reverse retros.
Reverse retros. Yeah. Like, they're showing off so much. And here's the other part. There's always a prime time game, whether it's Wednesday or Thursday. There's always a prime time game. You couldn't tell me you couldn't sit back and watch Pittsburgh against Philadelphia. You couldn't tell me you couldn't watch, Alex Ovechkin outshoot, Connor McDavid. I mean, my God, these primetime games have been king for hockey so far, and it's only just getting started. And baseball's lacking at this.
It is, and even though hockey's kind of in a little bit of a snag right now, especially with local TV deals, that's where the people are getting shafted the most, and it's really sad, particularly in Colorado. There's a contract dispute between Comcast and Altitude Sports right now. Like, people in Colorado can't even watch the Avalanche. There's things going, but hockey still continues to try and figure it out. NBC is pretty much shutting down NBCSN, but they're like, we'll take our games to the USA Network. We'll take our games to another local network.
Or you know what? I may have
a figure it out.
Yeah. Or you know what? I may have a thought, because Peacock's part of NBC. What if
they already do? They already do. There's a few select games that they stream on there already. They're already on it. They're already ahead of it.
Oh man, that's great. Because you know what? At least there's that sign of life. Because at this point, if you really can't get it with these cable and these television contracting deals, then you might as well just go mainstream media for all I care. Because at this point, it doesn't seem to work. And here's the thing. I don't even have cable out here, and I don't have cable whatsoever, because one, I'm tired of politics, and I'm tired of all the same the same spiel, in life. But I do have a Fire Stick, and I do have, I can stream games, I can get to games somehow, some way. But what's so just mind-boggling is out here in Vegas. Okay. We have Fox 5 now that's covering the Raiders. With that contract deal with Fox, And even with, CBS, they're contracting them now where they're trying to make it more of a home network. They don't even have that up in place yet, and they're trying. The other part is you have AT&T Sportsnet with the Vegas Golden Knights. And some of those, they come by either you have AT&T Uverse or you have like cable or whatnot. That's the only time. They don't even put it as like a home network to locals. I don't understand that. I've never understood that deal. And here's what's so funny. What started this whole thing with baseball, 2013. Do you remember how long the Dodgers were on Prime Ticket?
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then the second that they took the deal with Time Warner, then Spectrum, and I was like, are you kidding me? And then all these blackouts in California was pissing everybody. And I said, you know what you're doing wrong? You're pushing away all of the fan base that don't even live in LA, that live all in the West Coast region that are Dodger fans, and they can't even watch the games no more unless you have Spectrum. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And it's unfortunate for me being an A's fan because you have NBC Bay Area.
Bay Area, yep.
And you can't even and I was just like, this season, and correct me if I'm wrong, how many blackouts did we have in a short season? Jesus.
How many more do you think there are to come this year?
Oh my God. I was like
you know what the most frustrating part about all of this, you know what the icing on the cake is about all this, Jake, is that fans, regardless of any of this, will still turn out to ballparks when it's available again, because
very much
it's the middle of summer.
Yep.
There's nothing else on.
Yep.
And there's nothing else better to do than to pack up the family in the van, go down to the ballpark. It doesn't matter what night. It doesn't matter even who your team is even playing.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you can just be somewhere that's very family friendly, very chilled out, and that you can enjoy the atmosphere. Have a beer, enjoy the atmosphere.
Oh my God, I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, listen, when I grew up, when I was born and raised here in Vegas, I can't begin to tell you when I watched a game when they were the Las Vegas Stars out here, when they had Derek Lee and they had a bunch of really good prospected players, how many times I've gone to 51 games, and I practically grew up with these up-and-coming Dodgers: Russell Martin, Matt Kemp, Andre Ethier, Chad Billingsley, Jonathan Broxton, Eric Gagne, even James Loney. I grew up with watching these guys, and I had so much fun at those games. Then, just 2 years ago, my buddy of mine is a season ticket holder for the Las Vegas Aviators. And I was so excited because the A's struck a deal. And I feel like at some point the A's are going to be here in Vegas. I feel like it's going to happen because the payroll in
Oakland.
Yeah, because the payroll, the only payroll they're getting is in Alameda. That's it. All over of Oakland is just, it's washed away. Alameda is the only economic production they have. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, and so when the Aviators were playing here, man, I can't even begin to tell you how beautiful and gorgeous that field is in Summerlin. I sat right behind home plate and I could get a whole view of the outfield. It was like, God, it was like 70 degrees. You felt a slight breeze. You had a cold beer in your hand. You had a like a hot dog that was like nearly almost a foot long. You were just watching a great game. You were enjoying just a game. Like it was just like it felt like you're sitting at the beach or you're over there, like, you know, you're in Utah where you're like by the lake and you're just enjoying life right before your eyes. That's what it felt like when I was in a baseball game.
I mean, I could say the same thing about the Rockies. Growing up in Colorado, born and raised, I basically was alive for 2 years before that franchise even came into existence. And even with just the current situation with the Rockies, how they could absolutely give a terrible, terrible thing and excuses and have Jeff Bridich and Charlie and Dick Mumford come on and lie to your faces and tell you that winning still matters to them. Right. And it's sad because none of the fan base most of the fan base, most of the casual people who just go to the ballpark, they don't even care. And that's how much leverage these owners have
Yeah.
over everything in baseball.
Yeah.
Everything. It's because it's the wild, wild west. There's no salary cap.
Yep.
There's nothing to have for anybody else to have control other than the owners.
Yeah,
And-
it's true. It's very, very true.
And as long as they're making their money and the jersey sales and are flying off the shelves and you're going to the game for the ballpark more than you are the actual game, that
Right.
they will just continue to do whatever they want because it's
Right.
not affecting their pockets.
Yeah.
It's not at all.
It
Like
it really isn't.
The Rockies just gave Nolan Arenado to the Cardinals on a silver platter, and they're still going to draw 3 million people a summer at Coors Field when everything else opens up again.
Oh my God. I
Regardless,
mean,
you just threw away one of the best third basemen possibly in baseball history away and gave it to the Cardinals on a silver platter.
Yep.
And they're still but everybody loves to go to Coors Field.
You know what's so funny? I mean, I have friends of mine that, that again, they're diehard baseball fans. They love the Atlanta Braves. I remember they went to a game at Coors when they were playing the Braves, and they said, "Oh my God, I can't begin to tell you how freaking gorgeous Coors Field is. When you look at that outfield and you've got the trees and the waterfall and you're smelling the high altitude, and not to mention just the weather itself. It's like, oh my God,
Not even
probably
that.
best outdoors."
But when you get up on that first base line,
Yep.
third deck, and you can see out to the Rocky Mountains and you can see that sun go down just right over it with a nice Coors in your hand, and you see the mountains and everything. Boy, ain't no better sight than that. I'm not a Rockies fan anymore, but I'll tell you, I miss going to Coors Field.
Oh my God. I miss going to big time baseball ballparks in general, man. I mean, like I said, I've only been to Yankee Stadium when I was 6 years old, and that was the only time. I have yet to be at a Dodger game. I have yet to be in a Padre game at Petco. And people have told me Petco Park is so gorgeous about there.
It's
too.
amazing.
Oh
it's
my
amazing.
God.
It's amazing. I have a full on plan when all this is over. They have this thing, Jake. They have a ballpark passport.
Yeah.
That you can go get stamped at every ballpark. I'd love to do that. I'd love to go to every ballpark across America because
so do
each city has its own sight to behold with these ballparks.
Oh yeah.
But like back to the original point, it's just like, as long as there is no salary cap and no leverage for anybody else but the owners, they will continue to do this, and it is just shameful.
Yeah,
in every way possible.
It's just destroying really the livelihood of what baseball really should be about.
Yeah,
and it's unfortunate, but I don't know about you, Jeremy, but we've got this one. We have a segment here on the show that we do all the time, and I like to call it as the hot press. So basically, it's news talks that we're seeing currently in all of sports, and it could be any of them. One of them that they're big time takes. And for me, I've always done like the hot presses, but I was hoping, because with now my newly co-host here up on the show, if you'd like to do the honors of starting out the first ever hot press, being a part of the Snake Sports Talk Show, man, because all it is just we're just going back and forth with some of these news. It usually is like about 4 topics, at least 4 strong topics right now that are being talked about. So what do you say? Ready for it?
Absolutely.
All righty. Well, without further ado, and with, of course, the first time for Jeremy Case with the hot press. All right. Well, we've had at least bunch of news talks, and of course everything that's been going on around the league, but there's one news story that's been getting out. So of course too, so sources have been told that Miami and the North Carolina game, if I could pull this up, but apparently the basketball game between the Tar Heels and the Hurricanes have been postponed after a party video ended up surfacing. So just about 2 hours before the scheduled tip-off of Monday night's game, the decision came hours after the Daily Tar Heel student newspaper posted a Snapchat video that shows the standouts of Dayron Sharp and Armando Beckett partying without masks on, along with other young players who also aren't wearing masks Saturday after the 91-87 win over Duke. So this is kind of the thing that, again, precautionaries, I mean, it's kind of getting out of hand. But at the same time, this is where levels of accountability, and this is in collegiate level. And at this point, if you don't have this situated, I mean, this is going to get completely out of hand. And especially for college basketball, they didn't even have a March Madness last year. I mean, this is crucial.
Very. I mean, you're seeing it left and right, and I don't really mean to get too political or anything here, but there's grumblings going on within the scientific community that now this new strain coming out is going to be is touted to be a little bit more deadlier towards younger people. So these youngins need to get it together.
Yeah.
Because if that is true, I don't know it's true. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. I'm just listening to what's being said because and what else do I know? Because like I said, I'm not a doctor, but people need to start taking this a little bit more seriously. I hear people gripe and groan all the time about how I just want it back to normal. Then take it seriously.
Right.
Take it seriously. Wake up. I don't care if you are the healthiest person on this planet. Yeah. Take it seriously and do your part so that we can get it back to normal. So that you can party without a mask on. So that you don't have to worry about this and this isn't even a thought anymore. These young kids, it is not just with young kids either. It seems to be with a lot of athletes in general. Sometimes they're just exhibiting recklessness. I understand that it is very, very a really tall task to ask for players to isolate themselves. I understand what that does to a human psyche. There have been multiple studies over the years that just show that it's not a really good thing for humans to not interact with each other. I get it. I really, really get it. But at the same time, if you are part of a team and you are a asset to that team, and you just want this to go off without a hitch, and you want it to be back to normal, and you want fans in the stands and all this, you have to start taking this stuff more seriously.
Yeah, because this is basically holding a lot of these players accountable. I couldn't even agree more because, in order for us to be back to normal, if you're not following these protocols and you're not doing exactly what you should, at least these are people that are so inconsiderate of other people's healths. And I don't think people realize that. And I think that that's one that even in the collegiate level, this is where there has to be a level of discipline and accountability that has to be expressed. So
good luck with that with the NCAA. I mean, if anything has shown who doesn't have authority besides baseball, it's the NCAA.
Right.
I mean, look what they let happen in college football this year. That's all I got to say. Just look at that.
I've already put an asterisk on college football, and I was just like, this is ridiculous.
They let the SEC do whatever they wanted.
Right. So after the victorious win in Super Bowl 55 last night for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and for Tom Brady, sources were told that after the game, and of course the back and forth antics between Tom Brady and Tyrann Mathieu, the sources has been told that Tom Brady apologized to Kansas City Chiefs safety Tyrann Mathieu in a text message after the Super Bowl. So immediately after the game, text an apology to Tyrann Mathieu for several on-field verbal altercations. Brady, listen, Brady's done this kind of thing, and sometimes he has tendencies where he stands his ground, and really, you can't really deny that. But Tyrann Mathieu went on and said, I've never really seen that side of him. And, it was basically, he expressed it so much, and he basically called Tyrann Mathieu an incredible leader, a champion, and a class act, and a kid that came out of LSU that, when you talk about talents out of LSU, Tyrann Mathieu was unbelievable. But I felt like this was very humbling on both ends. For one, because on one side, you're talking about Tom Brady, who's done this for a long time. But like we mentioned about the slice of humble pie for Kansas City, they got the taste of their own medicine. And Tyrann Mathieu, a couple times, it was him, Chris Jones, a lot of these Kansas City Chiefs had these altercations. And sometimes that does happen. You poke the bear a bunch of times, you're not going to like it when he bites you. That's what happens. And that's sports. I mean, how many times have we watched Phillip Rivers talk smack so much? And players are just like, shut up. But at the same time, yeah, it's countless times. But at the same time, it's sports, baby. That's what it's all about. But at the same time, I'm glad that the two of them were able to just, come to a mutual agreement. And either way, it was just competitive nature. It happens all the time. I mean, you can't deny it.
Shout out to Tom Brady, because I feel like, honestly, it should have been the other way around. I feel like Tyrann Mathieu should have apologized to Tom Brady. And I don't understand what the hell Tyrann Mathieu is doing, because you've only put up 6 points. They put up 21 on you, and you're jaw jacking on the field. Why? Why are you doing that? And I understand why Tom Brady clapped back at him, because he's the greatest of all time.
Oh, yeah.
How are you going to sit there and try to jaw jack Tom Brady on the field? It makes no sense to me whatsoever, especially when they're hanging 21 on you and you've only had 2 field goals in the first half. What are you doing? Like, you should just eat that humble pie like Mahomes was doing, and just sit there on the sideline and shut your mouth all game long, because they're handing it to you, and they're handing it to you unapologetically as well. Right. They really are. And I mean, great recognizing that from Tom Brady. I appreciate that. But at the same time, like, it is, like you said, it's sports. It's in the height of competition. This is what happens, especially in physical sports. You don't really see this too often in baseball, and you kind of don't see it anymore in basketball. You used to a lot in the 90s because it was a lot more physical. But you see this a lot in hockey, and you see this a lot in football, because tensions are high. It's really physical. It's sports. It's sports. I love it. I love that stuff. I love it when Aqib Talib was going at it with Michael Crabtree, is snatching his chain and all that stuff. I love that stuff, because that's competitiveness. That's sports. That's why you watch it.
You don't like it, then force me to stop. That's like basically saying, like, if you don't like it, like, take for instance Derrick Henry. Nobody likes to tackle him. And if you don't like it, then hit me harder, because I'm going to pound right through that line. Or even in basketball, if you don't like it that I show off on dunks, then block me. Don't even allow the lane to be open. Like, what is this? Or even with Fernando Tatis Jr., you don't like it that I swung on 3-0 on a grand slam, then don't throw me a pitch. Like, don't throw me that pitch.
Right. Like, a lot of people complain about Barry Bonds' home run record. Well, they all pitched to him. They could have walked him like so many other pitchers did. You had that choice. Like, this is sports, man. Like, no player should ever walk out in any professional league on a field if they don't think that they're the best. If you don't think you're the best, what are you doing? Why are you playing sports? Why are you there? Because it certainly ain't for the love of the game. You should feel like you're the best.
Yeah,
I like it.
Absolutely. You got to feel exactly like your best. When you have a lead like that, that's shifting the tables. But again, there's a difference between playing chess and playing checkers. And ultimately, Tampa was playing chess. And that was what initially was the huge game changer. So in hockey news, so the NHL postponed additional New Jersey Devils, Buffalo Sabres, and Minnesota Wild games due to COVID-19. So 3 more of the Devils games, 2 additional Sabres games, and 2 more Minnesota Wild games were postponed. A decision on when the 3 teams can resume practices and gameplay will be made by the medical groups of the NHL, the PA, and each of the teams in the coming days. Now, the Sabres games are against the Capitals from the 11th through the 3rd and the 13th. Those are postponed. Buffalo, which was previously had 4 games postponed through the 8th, the Sabres facility has been closed since February 2nd. And now Sabres forwards, Dylan Cousins, Taylor Hall, Curtis Lazar, Casey Mittelstadt, and Tobias Ryder, and defensemen Rasmus Dahlin, Jake McCabe, Brandon Montour, and Rasmus Ristolainen are in protocol with coach Ralph Kruger, who tested positive for COVID in the 4th of February. So this is, and the Devils games against the Flyers from the 11th to the 13th, Boston on the 15th, the other couple games as well. So the Devils, they were postponed from February 6th, and their facility had been closed since the 1st of this new month. And Nico Hischier, Connor Carrick, Sammy Vatanen, Nate Bastian, Jesper Bratt, Nikita Gusev, Jack Hughes. I mean, the list is continuing to go on and on that these guys are on COVID protocols. But you and I talked about this initially when you were a special guest. This is getting completely out of hand now. And for it being a shortened season, it's becoming more and more difficult. It's becoming more challenging. And I don't know what you do with that with these teams. I don't really know how you even recover from this well. And how are these guys going to be back on the same page after all these postponements? I don't even have an answer for that.
Yeah, this is just mass disruption all across the board. I mean, think about it, Jake. The NHL went from being the league that handled this situation the best to in a few months handling it the worst. I mean, they try to do things. They try to take the glass out of the back of the benches.
What good does that do for a lot of people?
It really doesn't when you're sitting 2 inches from each other and you're both of the teams are close on the bench. It's the only game where both teams sit next to each other on the benches. They're not on opposite sides. So they said they got the HEPA filters, they got the portable ones that will recirculate the air every 30 minutes. They tried to do things, but honestly, the only thing that's going to make sure that these sports all go off without a hitch is to just simply go back to the bubble system. That is the only effective, true way that any of these leagues are going to get their season completed. And the NHL is under a lot more pressure than any of the other leagues, because they're scheduled. NBC has requested that they stop play before mid-July because tentatively it is scheduled that the Olympics are going to go off.
Sure.
And that they've requested that the NHL stop playing by mid-July for that specific reason. I don't know. There's been growing grumblings that the Olympics may be canceled. There's been NBC executives that came out and said it's going on no matter what. We're doing it. I don't know what's up or down anymore in this world, but I do know that the NHL better get this under control if they want to see this season out somehow, some way. If that means stopping it for 2 weeks and going back to the bubble, do it. Just do whichever you need to do, because like you said, this is getting so out of hand, and now you're just compressing schedules for teams, and it's going to disrupt the chemistry that all these teams have with the lines, especially with new faces going to, and B, it's going to grind on them. It's going to grind on them very, very intensely, because to ask a team to play 69 games in 102 days is like crazy. It's just so possible. Crazy. Yeah, that's like
not possible.
This isn't baseball. This isn't baseball to where it's like it's not as physical on you. This is hockey. You got guys. I mean, I remember specifically, Jake, when I was a Colorado Avalanche season ticket holder for 1 year, they let us go on the ice after the game. I went over to the benches. There was at least 30, if not maybe 50 packs of smelling salt on the benches on both sides. Like, this is a physical game. This is not, baseball to where you can take a day off.
Think about how many times that a goaltender has to take a shot every time, and they get welts, they get bruises, they get hit, and they're sore from head to toe. And then you think about all of these forwards and defensemen, they get checked, and then not to mention they fight and all, and
they're battling for pucks in the corner constantly, almost on every possession. And there's some defensemen who like to get out in front of the net, take a few shots, block it. They better do something, because this is getting extremely out of hand to the point to where now almost half the league is taking a 2-week break. You got nearly half the teams in the league taking 2 weeks off. They're not even playing. This is getting out of hand. This is ridiculous. They need to go back to the bubble system.
And think about this, because this is the last sport that we really want to take away some of these physical games. Not to mention, the aggressiveness, the toughness, and the grit. This is the last sport you ever want to end up taking it, because think about it. Baseball is already kind of going backwards. They're already going downhill, and it's no longer becoming competitive anymore. It's not, and that's the unfortunate part. But hopefully, hockey gets this right. I have good hopes in Gary Bettman is going to figure this out. But think about this. Think about the revenue they lost. They've lost the revenue from each of the stadiums. They lost the revenue from, I would say, from the television deals, and they lost the revenue alone from, the amounts of equipment and so much more. And think about it. This is a league that you look at the NFL and you look at the NBA and you look at Major League Baseball. Could you imagine how desperate, yet again, how blessed hockey would be, and then how much more hockey fans we'd get if they had the same similar payrolls as those 3 other leagues? We would.
Not only that, you're talking about the NHL. This is a sport that solely lies on those fan concessions, on that gate money. They rely for they've had to go to such extreme measures to sponsor the divisions this year. The divisions are sponsored. They got sponsorships on the helmet. They got sponsorships on the glass. They got sponsorships in everywhere, because they had to overcompensate for all that lost money that they're going to have to lose.
And hockey had not had a lockout since the 90s.
No, early 2000s.
Yeah, the early 2000s. Yeah.
2003, 2004, I believe, was that last lockout. But they need to get a grip on it, because if they don't, man, it's
going to be disastrous.
It's going to be bleak. It's going to be very, very bleak.
Yeah, it's going to be an absolute disaster. But, finally, of course, even after we had the Super Bowl, we had some unprecedented news as well, and some sad news in the baseball world and even in ESPN, with the passing of reporter Pedro Gomez, who's passed away at 58 years old. And it was kind of just out of the blue. It was like a completely out of the blue thing. But Pedro Gomez, of course, spent long years as a reporter, loved the game of baseball, and was a guy that really broke down the game itself, and a lot of different deals, different trades, different hires and fires, and so much more. He broke down so much, and a guy that has long lived for being one of the best guys, best reporters in ESPN. And that's kind of, you think about Tim Kirkjian and you think about a couple of these other guys in the baseball world, but Pedro Gomez was by far a different breed. And I thought he was remarkable. He was fun to listen to, and he broke down so much of it. But thoughts and prayers to Pedro Gomez's family through this time, and pray for comfort. And of course, for peace of mind. And man, this is a difficult loss. This is a difficult loss in the baseball world, and baseball really did lose a really, really valuable reporter through this.
Absolutely. Prayers to his family and condolences as well. I didn't even know that until you said that, Jake. I honestly didn't know. just because everything else has been taking such the forefront with all the sporting news. But
yeah,
I
mean,
mean
this literally hit my phone. I'm not kidding you. I was up in the post game show with Darian after the Super Bowl, and it literally hit not even about an hour, and that was like one that I was like, you got to be kidding, like they're
wow.
how and it's crazy. It just happened so fast.
It is crazy. I mentioned Barry Bonds so much because Pedro Gomez was at the forefront for a lot of Barry Bonds when he was chasing that home run record. He was like the Barry Bonds correspondent for ESPN at that time, pretty much. And what an extraordinary reporter. I mean, it's almost like how you felt when ESPN lost Stuart Scott. Like you feel like you felt like that was the loss of a huge poster reporter for basketball.
Yep.
Now this is like a poster reporter for baseball. He's gone.
Oh yeah.
And that's really, really unfortunate. And do they even know the cause of death or anything, or is that all still being investigated?
Right. Yeah. And that's
Do they know?
Like,
do they,
when
do
you
they
think about
know?
a lot of these reporters around the leagues, I mean, there was nobody who really could have broken the game of baseball better than Pedro Gomez could.
Do they know? Do they know how he passed, or is that still being investigated?
They're still kind of investigating the whole thing and how it happened, but they did say it was kind of it was at an unprecedented time, so it was very difficult to really kind of figure out how. But they are still doing some more investigations, and until we get more news on that, we will definitely keep everybody updated about that for sure.
That's sad. That's really sad.
Yeah, it's very sad. But, well, folks, that was the hot press. All right, so coming up, we've got our best for last here on this show. And listen, we're not going to end up doing winners and losers, because ultimately we already know. We already knew who our winners and losers from the Super Bowl was. So we're not going to do that. Instead, Jeremy's going to help me to break down some of these teams here. And I'm going to end up explaining, because there are NFL teams out there going into next season that I'm very optimistic about, that I do think could be potential Super Bowl contenders. And I'm going to do this by open and closed windows. Now, I did do this a while back with the teams that were in the playoffs. Now, we're not going to include those teams. We're going to include the ones that were outside that could potentially be looking in. And we'll explain that here coming up next after this break. But if you guys haven't done so already, and you guys love merchandises as far as t-shirts, hats, hoodies, and so much more, well, we've got that here at the SpotlightSportsGear.com. We know that the deal has passed already for those who have missed, and we did end up getting the giveaways. There are still more and more possibilities coming up, but when we have our new deals, but even before then, definitely check out the Spotlight Sports Network's gear right now on the merchandise at SpotlightSportsGear.com. Get yourself geared up, rep the network, rep your favorite shows on the network. We really do appreciate your guys' love and support. So definitely check it out here at the SpotlightSportsGear.com.
Once a Raider, bruh, always a Raider, bruh. Shit simple as that. You look silver and black. Lot of bread invested in that O-line. Car insurance cost the arm and the leg to reach that goal line. This goes out.
All right, folks. Well, first and foremost, we really do want to thank you guys for being on with Jeremy and I, of course, on the Snake Sports Talk Show. We really do appreciate it. And tell me what you guys thought about Jeremy's first time co-hosting here up on the show. I thought he did great, and I cannot wait for future shows to see exactly how we're going to be booming this thing. But I really did love today. Tonight, I thought it was really, really good, and we broke down a lot of stuff. And we're going to continuously break down a lot more as we go for the future shows. But we really do appreciate it, you guys. And if you haven't done so already, like, subscribe, hit the bell button for all latest notifications to get you up to date on future shows ahead. And also, if you guys have missed it, maybe you guys are too busy up at work, or maybe just didn't get a chance, go watch a couple of previous segments here on the Spotlight Sports Network on our YouTube channels. So definitely check it out for sure. And also subscribe to all of the channels and all of the shows represented here on the one network that's got you covered in all of sports, the Spotlight Sports Network. So my best for last from here. And Jeremy's going to help me out with this one, because what we know right now is that the two teams, obviously their Super Bowl windows are still open, Tampa Bay and Kansas City. As long as Tom Brady and the rest of this Tampa Bay team are still competitive, they're going nowhere. They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to stay competitive. They're going to continue to end up, they're going to continue they're going to continue to build upon this. They're going to build upon the championship. And Kansas City, Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, they will still be dynamic in multiple ways, but it will not be as easy as people will think, but they still will be competitive. So, and I've already broke down all the teams that were in the playoffs this year. So we're not going to end up including them. Instead, we're going to end up including the teams that were outside looking in. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get this started here. So Jeremy, let's go ahead and start getting some teams up out there. Which teams you got on the list that were outside looking in?
Well, I mean, it's gonna take some time to see how really it plays out, because obviously there's still that one caveat that we're all waiting for that pin to drop, and that's Deshaun Watson, right?
Right.
We're all waiting to see where he lands, because we all know that can be like a Tom Brady game changer to a franchise. Yeah. I mean, Las Vegas Raiders have expressed heavy interest in Deshaun Watson, and if they can make that work, if they could pull that off, Raiders, Raiders, that's, I mean, boy, can you imagine the trouble that would give Patrick Mahomes twice a season to have Deshaun Watson and Michael Crabtree and all those other.
Well, let's name off at least some teams. So the one of them that we're definitely going to talk about are the Las Vegas Raiders. We're going to talk. Right. So we're going to name off these teams that were outside looking in, and we'll give the predictions of, are their windows open, slightly open, or closed? Because I think we'll get a better evaluation on some of these teams and from some of their performances. So let's start that with the Las Vegas Raiders. I think their window is slightly open. The reason that I say that is because, number one, I've got a dynamic offense with Darren Waller, with Josh Jacobs, Derek Carr at the helm, and Nelson Aguilar, I thought, was fantastic. He needs to get a contract at some point soon. Now, what was the downfall from the Raiders? Well, the defense was giving up so many points. And by the way, it took way too long to get rid of Paul Gunther. And then they had to settle for Rod Marinelli as the interim, and now they have Gus Bradley. I have good hopes for Gus Bradley to reshape this team and their defense. But right now, with what I look at with the Raiders, they will be competitive. But as far as Super Bowl caliber, it's slightly open. They still have a shot. They still have a chance at it. But I just don't think as of right now, maybe give it about 2 more years or so, I think they'll figure this thing out. But it's slightly open.
That secondary was terrible.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Terrible. I mean, you got Gruden for 9 more years.
Yep.
He's on that 10-year deal for $100 million. So you got him for nine more years. And I think as long as they have him at the helm, and like I said, we're all waiting for that pin to drop to Deshaun Watson, and they've expressed interest. Like they're willing to mortgage a lot of their team to get him.
Yeah,
they said they were willing to give up Derek Carr, a couple of first rounders. Like they're ready to go all in and win now. That's why I say them, because if they pull that off, look out.
Yeah.
Here come the Raiders.
Yep. Here come the Raiders. Like they said, just win, right? That's their motto.
And I say that as a Broncos fan, just so everybody knows. I say that as a Broncos fan.
Yeah.
So
let's mention that then. The Denver Broncos. Right now, I have to say it's closed. It's closed right now. The unfortunate part about the Denver Broncos, and let me just break this down. I love Jerry Jeudy. I like what they've done with their running back core. I don't think it's quite there yet. They're still kind of working a few things, but I like what they've done, and I think it does show a little bit more of depth. The defense, your only hope is they retain Justin Simmons, and not to mention having AJ Bouye. Now, the big hit was losing Von Miller for that whole year, but Bradley Chubb, I thought was still good. I didn't see too much of Jarrell Casey this past year, so
lost him to an injury, big one.
Yeah, and a big injury. But the biggest reason why this window is closed right now for Denver is the quarterback. I mean, Drew Lock right now, it just seems like he's a reach of a pick, and it just doesn't seem like Denver really got this right. Now, Denver has a second chance, because if they get Deshaun Watson, if they find some way to make an offer that could potentially save John Elway with the way he's developed this whole thing, maybe Denver's got a chance. Or they may get Carson Wentz. I even spoke about the potentiality of Carson Wentz coming to there, because this is a kid from North Dakota State. He knows cold weather. And I think at the same time, it will be a little challenging with the altitude, but I think it feels like it's home to him in a way, right, when you think about just the atmosphere. So I feel like this window right now is closed for Denver, but if they continue to make decent picks and at the same time make some decent signings and moves, and again, with the quarterback position, then maybe that window might slightly open for them.
Well, yeah, and like you said, there's definitely some gleams of hope there, right? I mean, you had an improved season by Garrett Bowles, who couldn't do anything else but hold the season before, and now he's one of the best offensive linemen with an improved contract. They gave him an extension and everything. You had that. You have KJ Hamler, you have Jerry Jeudy, you have 2 young, great receivers like in that receiving core. You got 2 great backs with Phillip Lindsay, and
you're going to get Cortland Sutton back from injury.
Yep, and then you got Cortland Sutton, and then you got Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay, hometown boy, as your running backs. And what's Justin Simmons going to do? Because I mean, at that last press conference, it seemed like to me he was saying goodbye for good.
Right.
It didn't really. It wasn't like we'll see you next year. It was more like we'll see you never. So that there's a looming with that. They are picking at number 9 this year in the draft, which could also bode well for a run at somebody like a Deshaun Watson. Right. But the question is how much of your future are you going to mortgage? Because I hear this all the time in Denver. Let's get this straight. They are not going to trade Drew Lock and Von Miller and think that that is a fair trade. The Texans are not going to do that.
No.
Von Miller is still pretty elite, but his better days are behind him, especially with the injury that he took last year.
Right. Yes.
You know, that they're not going to trade him for that straight up in a couple of first rounders and think that that's going to land Deshaun Watson. It's not going to do it. You're going to have to mortgage a lot more of your future than that. I mean, we heard rumblings and rumors that the Raiders were going to offer, that they had tentative plans to offer the Texans 3-4 first round picks. It's going to take about that.
Yeah, Derek Carr and Darren Waller. I said, hell no. Absolutely not.
It's going to take a lot more than just an unproven quarterback and a past his prime linebacker,
right,
to seal that deal. It's going to take a lot, and I just don't know if that's worth it for Denver. I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with this organization right now. John Elway stepped down as general manager. They brought in George Payton. Now the ownership is going to be determined within the next year of where that's going. There's not even really a definitive owner of this team right now.
Right.
With the passing of the late great Pat Bowlen, I mean, you have Joe Ellis at the helm assuming duties, but there's also a lot of nasty court battling going on with the trust of Pat Bowlen and his children of who's going to take over this team. And quite honestly, I feel like it's going to be sold to a third party that's completely out because that family can't seem to get it together of who's going to own this team. And it's just a mess. It's a drawn out public mess, which it didn't have to be, but it is. It's just the best thing, in my opinion, for Denver to do right now is just to blow it up. Blow it all up. They should have done it 5 years ago after Manning retired. They should have done it. They should have just blow it all up because mark my words, Buccaneers fans, when Tom Brady's gone, enjoy it now as somebody who's lived and actually saw it. Enjoy it now because when Tom Brady's gone, everybody else is gone too, and it's back to the dark ages.
That's right.
So
that's absolutely right.
I mean, they should have just blew it up 5 years ago. And now they're at the point where they're just grasping at straws at this point. And I just don't think that even if they do mortgage their future for Deshaun Watson, what is that going to do? Quite honestly, you still have an offensive line that needs serious help. I mean, Garrett Bowles had an improved season, but he's the only gleam of light on that offensive line. That's it. And now you're not even sure that you even want Jarrell Casey back because I mean, you got him at a still bargain, but he also had a really, really tough injury that's hard to come back from, you know, and with the questions in the secondary, I mean, you got Bradley Chubb, and then unfortunately, you still don't even know what's going on with Von Miller at this point.
Right.
What's that all about? What's that investigation about? Because all they would say is that there's an investigation going on. They didn't say about what. There's just a lot of question marks on that Denver Broncos team and not enough answers to try and even say that they're even close to becoming competitive. They need to blow it up.
Yeah,
they really do.
They need to. But what's the next team that we got so far here to look at?
Seattle Seahawks.
Oh, that puppy is slightly open. The reason why that I say that is because as long as Russell Wilson is quarterback, he's going to take him as far as Seattle can go because he is initially the franchise. And what's unfortunate is the offensive line was so horrific in the playoffs. I mean, 5 times Russell Wilson gets sacked. And everybody wanted to basically pin Russell as if, you know, he was big and bad. He's not. He never showed that way. The offensive line is who I would have been yelling and screaming. And by the way, I thought they fixed this thing with the pass rush with Carlos Dunlap, but it's still lacking. And not to mention, too, Jamal Adams was a nice piece, but I think they still need more. It's not this Legion of Boom anymore like it used to be years ago. And that's where the secondaries have to play better. But here's the other part. I love watching DK Metcalf, but I kind of feel like they have to work more on that rush. And they even have to get at least maybe a couple pieces. Maybe they find it in free agency or in the draft for wide receivers because, listen, the wild card guy has always been Tyler Lockett. I like Jacob Hollister. I think he's going to be a kid that's going to be really good at the tight end position, but give me offensive line, give me a better secondary and a pass rush, and I feel like Seattle could potentially be back up on the map.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't expect Russell Wilson to make or break every single play that comes your way. You can't expect him to carry this team single-handedly because it's just not going to work that way. It's just not. I really don't have anything further to elaborate than what you said. You pretty much have made the points that I wanted to make, but you got to get him help on that offensive line. That has been a problem pretty much ever since they won that Super Bowl.
It's Max Unger and Russell Okung and a bunch of really good offensive linemen. I mean, they let him go in a big way, and it's really showing for itself.
It hurts.
Yeah. So what's the next one?
San Francisco 49ers.
Oh, this window's open. I do believe this window is open. And the reason why I say this, San Francisco didn't have problems with as far as their players. They just had problems with injuries. They're going to get all their defensive players back. Nick Bosa is going to be healthy. The secondaries are going to be even better. And by the way, Javon Kinlaw, I feel like is going to really show in a big way because remember, he was basically the draft pick that was traded for DeForest Buckner. And it's not like San Francisco lacked on their defense. They got a little better on it, but they're going to be even stronger because of the players coming back from injury. The other part, they're optimistic right now about Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, of course, the Deshaun Watson thing. I feel like that if San Francisco put together a deal Houston could not refuse, this is why this window is open for a reason, because I feel like San Francisco could make a legitimate deal for Deshaun Watson. And if they do, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Kevin Bourne, a healthy Raheem Mostert, and Tevin Coleman, Kyle Shanahan's going to have the right piece in place for him to make a potential Super Bowl run. That's why I feel like that window's still open. They're going to have those players there at the helm, and I think San Francisco is still going to be at the right position.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you still got some bright stars on that defense. You still got Richard Sherman. He said he still wants to play another 2 years before he retires. You got some bright spots on that defense. You got Tevin Coleman too. I mean, you got a pretty good team there, but I just don't know where they're going right now because they like you said, they couldn't make an offer that Houston couldn't refuse, but they're also inquiring about Carson Wentz. I don't understand.
That could be a backup plan because here's the thing. I mean, Kyle Shanahan is an offensive-minded coach. He's a guy that, again, he was part of the reason of Matt Ryan's success because he was the one who was as an offensive coordinator for Dan Quinn, made Matt Ryan work. And these are three possibilities. You have Deshaun Watson, who's one of them, and I think is the big fish. Carson Wentz could be the second option because if it doesn't work for Deshaun, then at least they can go to Carson Wentz, who, again, I think he has really good accuracy. I think he's a guy that can move out of the pocket, and he's a guy that can make the throws. And he's got athletic receivers that we know because Brandon Ayuk is going to have a better season next year. And Matt Ryan could potentially be the guy on block because it's a reunion between him and Kyle Shanahan. There's nobody who can understand Kyle Shanahan's playbook better than Matt Ryan can. And think about this. This is the takeaway. Because San Francisco's offensive line is one of those reasons. I mean, Trent Williams and their center, they got that's a pretty good offensive line. I'm not going to lie.
Oh yeah.
That if you're Carson Wentz, you'd be happy to have an offensive line that could stay healthy. And that's why I think
keep you upright.
Yeah, they don't keep you in the upright. So that's why I think.
I mean, they're the sole reason why Raheem Mostert is even a known household name is because of that offensive line. But I just kind of question too. It's like, so you inquire about Wentz, maybe bring it, but then why'd you bring in Josh Rosen? And I don't understand. Maybe it's just because
I think it's more. I think it was more of. I think it was more of depth, because you have to think about it. Shanahan was kind of tired of Jimmy G being hurt, and think about it, because you were either going to, and I think he was tired of having to go to either Nick Mullins or CJ Beathard. I think he was tired of that. And I think part of that reason was because of all of these injury riddles. That's why they had to bring in Josh Rosen for that reason, because of extra depth. Because if it was going to happen to their quarterback position, this from a Denver perspective, why the Broncos got hit as hard as they did. They had no quarterback. And I think that's part of the reason that I think San Francisco made that move, because at least they'll have an emergency quarterback if something was to happen to Beathard or Mullins.
Yeah, and COVID too. I mean, you saw it this year more than any, how COVID can really affect a team and just absolutely shake your team to the core, quite literally, and leave you with nothing. I mean, we had a wide receiver playing quarterback this year because all three of our quarterbacks got put on COVID protocol.
Right.
and the Browns, they had to play with a third string offensive line.
Right.
Like you just see it. And so, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, John Lynch is a mastermind. He's not dumb by any means, which, by the way, Jake, you failed to mention as well. He got elected to the Hall of Fame this year as well. John Lynch did.
Yeah, John Lynch. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, man. I mean, congratulations to him. I mean, it was well deserved. I mean, that was a guy that, again, part of that Tampa Bay defense. He was probably the most vocalized player that I saw when I watched bits and tapes of that rerun of the Super Bowl. That was the only person that talked in the defense. He was the only guy that was hyping everybody up. And you know this for Denver too, how many times he spoke in that defense as well for Denver.
He was the only player I could remember watching where you just see him lay some of the hits he did, and you were like, I hurt, and I'm watching it.
Yeah.
I hurt.
Right?
He laid on some absolute thumping hits on some people.
Right. So who we got next up here up on this list?
I think the one everybody's the biggest, I think one of the biggest question marks this offseason, more than anything, and is more riddles, the Green Bay Packers.
I think the Packers, I truly think the Packers right now, their window's slightly open. The reason why that I say this is because, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is coming off of an MVP season. And I think what Green Bay did right, you could say what you want to about the Jordan Love trading pick. You could say what you want to about it. Yes, it did push Aaron Rodgers to his extent, but Green Bay's future's protected. That's the one thing you could say. And the other part of it is Devontae Adams is a hell of a receiver. But the other portion of this is because I think they need to get more physical on defense. Now, even though Rashawn Gary, Christian Kirksey, and the Preston and Za'Darius Smith, they're real good pieces. But I think the one big hurt for them was the Blake Martinez move. I cannot believe they let him walk, and he takes that deal with the Giants. Yeah. And that was one that was a complete ball hog. But I think, too, they need a little bit of a reshape on the secondaries. I still do think Adrian Amos is a good piece, and there still are some good pieces there. But I think they just need to give me more physicality. None of this finesse stuff. And then on top of it, get Aaron what he wanted. Get him a secondary receiver, for God's sakes.
Get him another weapon.
Yeah,
get him another weapon.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing against MVS and Alan Lazard, but you can't tell me there are legitimate number 2 options. That's just not possible. It's just not. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you see it. You see it rear its ugly head in the playoffs. Like, they all know who he's going to go to a lot of the time, and it's Devontae Adams. Right. They know it. Every team, that's kind of what made Tampa Bay so good last night. You didn't know whether he was going to throw to Gronk, whether he was going to throw to AB, whether he was going to throw to Mike Evans. You didn't know.
Yeah.
Chris Godwin, you didn't know. You didn't know who he was going to throw to. But with Aaron Rodgers, it just seems like it's a little bit one-dimensional in that aspect.
Right.
It's just a tad bit one-dimensional. And yeah, you need to make this man happy this offseason, because if not, best believe he is going to be pounding the table to get out of there, and rightfully so. Because if you are not going to give this man what he needs to win you a championship, then what are you good for as an organization?
Right,
really.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just that simple. I mean, they need a little bit more offensive power, because you could see that it hurts them when it matters the most. When the brightest lights are on, and you can't even win an NFC championship game at home. That's bad, with fans too. With some fans, there were fans there. So, I mean, it's just it's like the biggest question mark ever, because like there's some of his agents or people around Aaron are saying that he's super unhappy, and that, you know, he's not they can't see that it's unreasonable for him to walk away. Then there's people saying that it's fine, everything's fine. I don't even know what's up or down in that city or that team anymore.
I won't believe any of the news stories until I see exactly for Aaron Rodgers myself.
Well, yeah, because
that's kind of just the way that I played this. Because listen, people will say he's unhappy, but think about it though. He came off of an outdated system in Mike McCarthy, and brings in Matt LaFleur, who is offensive minded. He's a guy that really reshaped this offense for Green Bay. And Aaron, like, he was executing. I don't see any issue of why he would be unhappy with that reason. Now, I could see why, as far as general managing moves go when it comes to certain players, but I just feel like Green Bay, and remember, this it's like we mentioned about Russell Wilson. Seattle thrives under Russell Wilson. And I feel like Green Bay is in a position where they thrive under Aaron Rodgers. Because if Aaron Rodgers left tomorrow, that would have been over for Green Bay.
Yeah.
Green Bay would not be in this position without Aaron. They wouldn't be.
Yeah, and of course, like you said, they're all rumors and speculation. I'm not really going off of those, because I understand we're in the time of sports of the hot take and whatnot. You know, that's kind of what sports lives and dies by as far as sports talk goes. Right. I'm reading his emotions from when he left the field from last year. You know, it didn't seem like he was all too happy. It hasn't seemed like he hasn't been really that happy ever since the Jordan Love situation. And I just kind of read in between the lines there. It doesn't. I don't know. Maybe he could walk away, but he's definitely unhappy. And the Green Bay Packers have one job this offseason, and that is just to simply make him happy and give him what he wants. I mean, you saw it last night. Bruce Arians had no trouble handing over the reins to Tom Brady and letting him basically do what he wanted, and it won them a Super Bowl. I don't understand why Green Bay can't do the same thing with Aaron Rodgers and just give him what he wants, because he knows what he needs. He's not dumb. He's not a dumb quarterback. He knows exactly that if he gets what he wants, it will produce a championship. So please, Green Bay, listen to him. This man is going to be your guiding light for your franchise, and his body is showing signs of breaking down. He doesn't have as long as Tom Brady does.
That's right.
So you're like you said, that window is slightly open. It ain't going to be open for long.
That's true. It's true. Yeah. I mean, we said it best. That's where Green Bay stands up on it. What's our next teams that we got?
I really don't have any other teams. I mean, because I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh no, what's Kansas City going to do now?" They're fine.
Let's talk about that, because we mentioned about the Raiders and the Broncos. We haven't mentioned the Chargers. I feel like the Chargers window it's slightly open, but it's only because it's not like it's like open, like it's going to bust open. It's kind of slightly open. Like I only have like maybe a peep And the reason why that I say that is because we did not expect this from Justin Herbert this past season. We did not expect the rookie season that we saw, and I think he's talented. I think he's got a lot of grit. And if you actually see from his press conferences how humble of a quarterback he is, a guy that puts team first. We watched Tom do this last night, how he put the team first. Justin Herbert, I feel like, does that. And the other part of this, they have talent everywhere. They've got talent everywhere. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler. I'm hoping Josh Kelly is going to be really good. And they've even got Justin Jackson, and they got Kalen Ballage, who I thought was a low radar pickup. You know, a guy that you pick up on fantasy as a waiver wire that I thought really excelled. And the defense, Joey Bosa, continuing to be consistent. And the secondaries. Hopefully a healthy Derwin James is going to be good. And then not to mention a lot of the veteran leadership that's there on that defense. Now, the takeaway of why this window is like this is because of the fact that the Chargers hired Brandon Staley. Staley is coming off of a number one defense with the LA Rams. And the guys he worked with was Leonard Floyd, Michael Brockers, Aaron Donald, and Jalen Ramsey. And when I mentioned about how Jalen Ramsey played, at least he still stayed on the field. Think about what he could do with Derwin James. Like I talked about this. I defended Derwin James from my colleague because he was like, you guys just need to move off it. Well, hold on a second. Because if we moved off him now, we would never have the opportunity of seeing what Staley could do with him. We wouldn't. And at that point, it would have been too early because the last thing I would have said was like Jason Verrett goes to San Francisco and he was so injury prone with the Chargers. Never got a chance to really kind of see what he's capable of. And then he actually had a pretty decent season for San Francisco. That's my fear with Derwin James. I'm not going to give up on him. I'm going to see how Brandon Staley does because knowing what he did with Jalen Ramsey could be hope for Derwin James. And at the same time, they need to get an offensive line. They need to get some very valuable pieces, but they are very close to being a very intimidating and competitive team that people think. And I say this as a realist because you could say what you want to about Mahomes. You could say what you want to about, but this is what's funny because I'm watching this on these comments right now. I am watching this on these comments. They're not seeing what I'm seeing. I got Charles Alexander here. He's never won the big one. Mahomes is elite. That's not his fault. Did you watch the game against Tampa? I mean, 38-31. He was not backing down from a fight. The defense was what cost it, and you had Gus Bradley. And then you had Anthony Lynn. And from what I was told, Anthony Lynn tried to control everything. And maybe that was part of the reason why the Chargers unraveled. So if Brandon Staley can make this balanced, mark my words, the Chargers are going to prove a lot of people wrong next season. And I think it's going to start from that right there.
Well, the biggest question I have with them is how much is the tape going to be out on Justin Herbert? How much, because he had a pretty good, he had a pretty good showing there in the first season. But as we all know, sometimes quarterbacks get figured out.
Yeah, they do.
Tape gets out on them. And I just wonder how much of that was teams not having tape on him yet. Because that's the biggest question I always have when a young quarterback makes a boom first season out of the NFL. I mean, we see it.
And now remember this, and this is where people kind of fail to realize. But here's what's interesting: the first time that Justin Herbert met the AFC West division teams, right? He lost the first time, but the second showing, he won all three games. it may not be the first time that really wins it, but sometimes second time is usually the charm, right? And that's the one thing I think Justin Herbert evaluated and looked at. I think that's going to really boost it up for his potentials. Now, because ultimately, when you think about this, why do you think the LA Rams did what they did of getting Matthew Stafford? Because it wasn't just about Jared Goff not being the guy, but it was because of the loss to one particular team, San Francisco, in division.
Yep.
It's the most important thing. And I think in this case and in this cause, because first and foremost, you got to win your division first before you could even, blow away like the Jets or the Texans or any of these other teams that are not within your division. Because even if you lose those games sometimes won't matter in that, because you're not in the same division, but you still got to have at least a maintainable record to make the playoffs. But all of it has to be beating your opponents that you face twice a year. I mean, that's kind of how yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, those divisional games are pretty much your bread and butter as far as what's going to put you in the playoffs or not.
Yeah.
Whether that be justifiably or unjustifiably. But
exactly.
I do. That's the biggest question mark I have is, what is Justin Herbert going to do this year? Like, how much of it is teams just not having really film on him, and because that's gonna show out in his second year.
It will.
It will.
It really will. And I think because if you really think about it, offense was never the problem. The defense was what really cost the games. Because why would we have so many of these close games? You're asking Herbert to save your life every time. And the kid's a rookie. I mean, the kid could move downfield. And think about it. He was facing off against a really tough New Orleans Saints defense last year. And that puppy went to overtime and was still managing to fight. And he had 4 touchdowns, no picks. What more do you want out of him? Like, initially, he's doing exactly his job. And that's where I'm like, this irrelevancy is killing me, man. They're like, Herbert will be a backup by the end of this year. Herbert is fool's goals just like Josh Rosen. Shut up. Like, oh my God. Like,
I mean, I mean, every situation has the potential to be that, but I don't even know. It's so hard to say because it's such a short sample size because, Herbert, he only played like what, 6 games?
Yep. Just about 6 games.
And so it just, I don't know. And
or actually, I mean, he actually played 15. He actually played almost a whole season because it was only just the one game. It was only the one game he missed.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, you pretty much made all the points I need to. I really don't have any more teams unless you do, really.
Right. Yeah. I think one team in particular. Miami. I think Miami's window is definitely. I think it's slightly open right now, but it is getting closer to being fully open than you think. Brian Flores is a hell of a coach. The defense really was solid. And this is with Xavier Howard. This is with a bunch of really good players. And by the way, I know people have questions about Tua, if he's really the guy. And then you have Ryan Fitzpatrick. And I truly think that Miami has exactly the right pieces, but they're still missing a few. I think if they go and get themselves, because they got the number 3 pick in the draft. My speculation is because if they're trusting Tua, they go and get Devontae Smith. They're going to need another wide receiver because initially, if you put Smith there with Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki, and Gaskin. I feel like that could be an interesting team by next year. I mean, because listen, we watch Buffalo, but Buffalo's lack is that run game. Buffalo's lacking in the run game, and that's where they're going to address getting a running back. But Miami, because they got Gaskin and they have a couple of good running back depth, that's going to be a team that's going to make a lot of noise. But initially, the question is, do you trust Tua or do you not? That's the part that I think Miami's kind of stuck with. And again, with this Deshaun Watson thing, because I feel like if you plug in Deshaun Watson in Miami, I mean that team's going to be going there. That team is going to be better.
Well, yeah, and who knows who he might bring with him too. It's just like Stafford in LA. He already had teammates texting him to come and join him in LA. Like Deshaun's probably he's gonna carry that type of weight as well, no matter where he goes. He's gonna be the one person that attracts a lot of different players, much like a Tom Brady did at Tampa Bay, where he was attracting Ndamukong Suh and all those guys to come in and join him. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the biggest. I'm telling you, that is the biggest needle that everybody's just waiting to see drop this whole year, because it could put a whole conference really on its ear. Really could. It really could. That's just how powerful Deshaun Watson is.
Right.
So, I mean, that's like the biggest caveat with all these teams. I mean, hell, it's even a caveat for Jacksonville at this point. Like they could very well just say, well, we'll mortgage our pick for Trevor Lawrence for him.
Yeah.
Just as easy.
Right.
Just as easy.
Yeah, just as easy. I mean, it's going to be really interesting how they really speculate this thing. But again, they're not as far away that people think. They're much like, I mean, they really impacted on defense, but the problem of that was that whole quarterback swap every time. That was what was the unfortunate part for Miami. But yeah, I think is really good. I think it's going to be really good, but I do feel like that if they get Watson somehow in that trade, now remember, wide receivers there are a lot of depth for wide receivers, but I feel like that if they do make a trade, they're going to have to trade away that third pick. And I do think that they're going to end up having a real good pricing to getting Watson there. So,
I mean, and if they get Deshaun Watson, man, Josh Allen better be pounding the table up there in Buffalo to get a better run game, to get something better, because Miami's going to be coming for him.
Yeah,
for that division, they really will.
Oh yeah, I mean, and think about it. It's going to be the most exciting division right there, because Buffalo and Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs are very competitive, and not to mention you have Sean McDermott and Brian Dable. Miami with Brian Flores and that defense, and a couple of really good, remarkable offensive players. The Jets with Robert Saleh. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to be dynamic, because this is all just cleaning the mess. This is all just cleaning the mess from this organization. But Robert Saleh, from what I'm told, is very much connected with his players. Like, he's very friendly with his players. And I think that that's one that's going to be a huge catalyst. Now the question for the Jets is are you going for Watson or are you sticking with Sam Darnold? Because my thing is, if you keep Sam Darnold, then what you can do is, because they're going to need a new offensive line. And I think, to me personally, that's
everything.
That's another place that I feel like they should get Devontae Smith. And let me explain to you why. Because you got Denzel Mims, who I think is going to be a remarkable wide receiver than people think. I think he was really good in Baylor. I think he's interesting. And the other part of it, you put Devontae Smith there on the other side. that wide receiver core is going to be built to its extent. They do have players. I mean, Jamison Crowder, who's real good. He's a slot type of receiver. Now the tight end's going to be interesting, but I feel like this is going to be a revival mode for the Jets. They're going to clean this mess up. Robert Saleh's going to really shape this defense up, because I don't know if you've seen, but I saw the defensive front line get aggressive. And I think the secondary, the one player that really caused a lot of problems was Marcus May. I mean, that guy can play. And I think there is a lot of potentiality for the Jets as long as you just let Robert Saleh do his thing. The hopes are there. I mean, the possibilities are there.
Right. Absolutely. I agree 100%. I really do.
So, folks, well, we just got bits and portions of some of these Super Bowl windows that we have for a couple of teams as we've recapped. Raiders slightly opened. Seattle slightly open for the moment. Packers right now are slightly open. Miami is one other team, but the Broncos, they're definitely closed. The 49ers are wide open. The 49ers still have an opportunity, but Denver's closed. The Chargers are kind of slightly open, but not all the way. They're just only about a peep. So there are a couple of teams there that I think are seeing some really good potentialities to a couple of them. And I'm sure we're going to get down to the list as we go too. We still got more episodes for it as well, because we're really trying to break down and we're really trying to get a real good evaluation for some of these teams. Because again, teams have gotten new head coaches, teams have gotten new personnels, and that does make a lot of difference. That does make a big difference in the world, because then initially that's when free agency begins. And that's where now you're going to have players on free agency that we're not even sure if they're going to go or they're going to stay. And then you have the draft. So that's what's the most, that's what I like about stuff like this, because at least it'll give us a thought, and it'll give us something where we can just predict right then and there about whether the window is closed or open. And then, because once it's closed, I mean, that just means they got a lot of work to do. And if they're slightly open, they're closer, but not completely to where they feel like they're a complete team, like they're Tampa Bay. And then, of course, the wide open march. San Francisco's got the chance, because you're going to get healthy players back. And again, they can sweeten the deal of getting Deshaun Watson, because I feel like that would be a match made in heaven there with him and Kyle Shanahan. I really, really do. But
I mean, this is the year for the 49ers to stop making excuses with the injuries.
It's true.
This is it. This is the year. This is the year where you can solve this problem with Garoppolo and his injury-ridden, self, and you could just put all that. You have the chance to put it all behind you and come out and really form a team that can be almost virtually indestructible. You have that opportunity now.
Yeah, you do. I mean, the time's now, and that's where you got to make this work. Shanahan needs to get back in the Super Bowl. That's kind of just the do or die situation right now with San Francisco. Now, it will be interesting what's going to happen with the defense without Saleh there. It is going to be interesting how they're going to really shape that defense as a whole, but I think they still got a lot of potential. I just think it's going to be really, really good. But, well, folks, we really do appreciate you guys coming on here in tonight's live stream. We really do appreciate all the love and support you guys have had here for the network and so much more. As, of course, myself and Jeremy Case, we're going to be signing off here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. We will keep you up to date, because I know that there are a couple of things I know I've got personally going on this week, but we will definitely keep you up to date on episodes as well, because I know this weekend I'm going to be out of town, but we will definitely get things refreshed on a Monday as usual. But I appreciate your optimism, Charles, but sometimes too, when I see you speak irrelevancy, I'm just like, I can't. I really, really can't. But I do appreciate your support, man. But either way, we really do appreciate it, guys. We really do. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell button for latest notifications and get yourself notified for future episodes. And if you haven't, if you missed this episode, go watch a few past segments here on the Spotlight Sports Network. But we are definitely getting out of here, and we will see you guys next time.
See ya.
Take care.